right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jeff Billy. I'm the Aviation Director for Brazoria County, GA Committee Chairman for the South Central Chapter. Thanks for being with us today. We missed last month's opportunity for a meeting, just stuff going on. So we're happy to be back and happy to be doing this today. We've got a great speaker and program today. Just going over a quick format. I forgot to do an agenda for the meeting today. What I thought we'd do is hear from our speaker and maybe do a little Q&A, and then after that, time permitting, we may do a little bit of discussion, just get a feel for if there's anything going on out there, any questions or challenges that anybody has or wants to bring up that that we may want to discuss as a group or offline or forward up to SCCAAAE or even make Alex at MBAA aware of. So we'll go to that point and see where we're at on time. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Alec Gersten is the Director of Airports and Ground Infrastructure with the National Business Aviation Association. He's got 25 years of experience in the industry. I was looking over his bio. Crazy amounts of work history he's got. White House Travel Office, Lockheed Martin. When I first met him, it was with SCCAAAE there in Virginia when I was getting into the airports and going. That's when I first met Alex, and also the Air Traffic Control Association. He also founded a firm called Aviation Fury, and now is with MBAA. He's a graduate of the George Washington University, and he has a master's degree also from Johns Hopkins University. If you know Alex, or if you follow him on social media, he is everywhere. He's very active. I could see, just got back from Oshkosh and was chatting with him for a minute, but he's very active in aviation and with the associations. We see him at some of our AAAE conferences and some of these NBAA conferences that we're fortunate to go to. And so, Alex, we appreciate your time being with us today, giving us some perspective on NBAA, some of the issues and things that you and your membership have on their radar screen, which you want to share with us today. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you for that special introduction.
And let me interrupt, Alex. I'm sorry. Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
Let's make sure everybody's on mute if we could before we get started. That way we do real good at not drowning out Alex or interrupting him. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to spend with me this afternoon and talk about the business aviation side of our general aviation community. Very excited to be with you and to share some of our thoughts, updates, and then, as Jeff mentioned, to have a nice discussion and Q&A towards the end. So for those who may not be familiar with NBAA, I just have a few slides at the beginning to share a little bit about who we are and what we are. We're a little bit younger than AAAE. We started in 1947, and this year are celebrating our 75th anniversary. Essentially, if you look back at history after World War II, there was a surplus of aircraft that were beginning to be used for business, and our industry was really being born in the mid-1940s, and ultimately there was a need for advocacy, for representation on Capitol Hill in front of the federal agencies as regulations started to take shape, and our organization was born and evolved tremendously over the last 75 years to who we are today. I know Jeff and probably a number of you come to our conferences and events and really see us in action. We hope that we are able to be very much complementary to what you do with AAAE, ACI, and other organizations, especially being really strong on the general aviation side and advocating for you, airports, because we see you as part of an important part of our membership and ultimately an important part of the industry. Our members are based at your airports. Our members rely on the airports for the beginning and end of their flights. As you know, airports play an integral role in terms of places where aircraft go to be maintained, and on and on and on. So airports are very important to us, and I'm thrilled to have spent most of my career working with airports since essentially 2003. I've been heavily focused on airports, and this is really a privilege for me, as you'll see resounding throughout my presentation. Advocating for airports, advocating for safety is just a really important, really close to my heart. So who are our members? We have over 11,000 member companies is the way we look at it. So our membership in terms of individuals is much, much greater. But as a company joins, the people that are affiliated with that company all become members and get access to our conferences, events, and all of our member benefits. Some companies can be large Fortune 500 companies like American Express and Home Depot, Walmart, SC Johnson, places that we know, products that we use every day. And for those of you who have these companies at your airports, you recognize how they leverage business aviation, how important business aviation is, and ultimately how we're able to have the robust economy and the business moving at the speed of a jet speed, essentially, in our country as the result of these companies utilizing business aviation. But if we took a closer look at the cross-cut of our membership, we will see that there are a number of individuals who fly single-engine pistons to piston twins to turboprops to light jets, of course, helicopters, all accomplishing the goal of moving people, providing services, moving goods with business aviation. So it's essentially non-scheduled, on-demand type of transportation that our country thrives on. More recently, we've welcomed some additional types of members. A number of companies are using UAS. And then, of course, we're all talking pretty much every day now about the latest segment of the industry that's developing, and that's advanced air mobility and the electric vertical takeoff and landing and electric fixed wing aircraft that are coming online. We're very much working very closely with those OEMs and other stakeholders involved in that. Last year, 2021, we established a roundtable, Advanced Air Mobility Roundtable, where we brought some of those core companies to the virtual table to discuss issues and to start focusing on infrastructure, what's important at airports, what is important in airspace, and ultimately working with the FAA on the regulatory framework. The companies, as you know, have been heads down, really focusing on developing their flying machines and getting them certified. But we wanted to get their attention to say, hey, if you're saying you're going to be operating in just the next few years, 23, 24 timeframe, it takes us a while to develop the regulations and to get them in place so that when you roll out that newly shiny aircraft out of the hangar that's just been certified, you want to make sure that you have the infrastructure and that airports, vertiports are prepared to receive it so that you can really use it to transport in the local area, in the region, and around the country as intended. I mentioned that airports are an integral part of it, part of our membership and what we do. Here are just some examples where we did a webinar focusing on airports and protecting business aviation infrastructure. The other photo on the right is Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport exhibiting at our annual convention. And I know many of you have been. I just picked this particular airport to spotlight because I thought they do it in a very unique way, where they create a booth, and as you can see, all the stakeholders of various FBOs and others at the airport have a chance to have a little table and have representation. So ultimately, if I'm a conference attendee, it's as though I'm making a visit to the airport where I can visit with the airport director. I can visit with the various FBOs, get all the information that I need, and potentially be persuaded, if I'm not currently using that airport but using another airport in the region, to try it or to switch. So it's a great opportunity. And I'll talk about another couple of conferences that are very helpful to airports that we do. You can see we do a number of, we write a number of different web stories and things like that to promote airports, to share with our members the latest developments at airports. We have a very robust regional team divided into 5 regions. So a lot of you may know Steve Hadley, who is our regional representative for the South Central region, which I think aligns with the chapter pretty well. There might be some states that spill over into Greg Boos's territory in the Southeast. But ultimately, our regional reps live in the region. So Steve lives in Dallas and Greg lives in Atlanta. And they're our front line on all the issues that NBAA works with and deals with, and are also intimately familiar with our members who are based at your airport. So we encourage you to get to know our regional reps. We encourage you to reach out to them, as well as, certainly everyone's welcome to reach out to me as the airports person at the association. But our regional reps will have a lot of local experience and expertise, and they're able to come to a lot of your meetings, whether it's safety perspective from the RSAT teams, the safety action, the runway safety action teams, to whatever issues you might be having or discussing at the airport, whether it's an aviation day and you'd like NBAA presence to promote, advocate for the airport, or whether it's a meeting with the users to discuss some changes. Feel free to invite us, and chances are our regional representatives might be nearby and able to attend and help in any way that we can. So just, I think I've covered the regional program, but we do have a conference where all of our local and regional groups, you may be aware of like the North Texas Business Aviation Association, that type of group. Their leaders have a chance to come together, exchange ideas, and feed off of each other. The groups are affiliated with NBAA, but they are separate, very similar to how the chapters are, right? Chapters are affiliated with the mothership, SCCAAAE, but operate independently. These groups are the same, and I encourage you to get to know them, get to know their board of directors, their leaders, engage with them. A lot of airports like to host socials and happy hours and things like that, where you might have a speaker or a luncheon. I know that Dallas Love Field does that quite a bit with the Love Field Pilots Association and some other groups. Just great opportunity for airports and users and tenants to come together in a social way, in a productive way, to discuss current issues and ongoing events. Some of the other resources, if you're members, you're probably getting our NBAA Insider Daily newsletter. It has aviation news from NBAA and other sources that we think are relevant. And that comes, again, that comes out daily around 11 a.m. Eastern. Just a great resource, in addition to, I'm sure, a myriad of other aviation newsletters that you receive. Then we have a printed magazine as well. It comes out bi-monthly, called NBAA Insider. We do webinars. We call that our news hour. And I also wanted to highlight that we have started maybe 3 years ago now, our 40 under 40 recognition. This is in addition to what the Airport Business Magazine does. This is an NBAA 40 under 40 recognition, and it includes an airport category. So we typically recognize a handful of young professionals in the airport business. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Typically the nominations are due in June. So this just closed a couple of months ago. And then we honor them at our convention, which is typically in October. Some of the other events, I said I was going to highlight this. So our big event is called NBA BASE, and that stands for Business Aviation Convention and Exhibition. And that's coming up quick, October 18th through the 20th in Orlando. And that's an amazing event where we have over 1 million square feet of exhibit space, hundreds and hundreds of exhibitors. You can really get lost on the exhibit floor. But you have everyone from aircraft manufacturers to avionics manufacturers, interiors, everything you can think about, aircraft related, service providers, fuel providers, FBOs. We do have a number of airports that come and exhibit at that conference. But most of the airports find Schedulers and Dispatchers Conference, which is going to be in January in Nashville, which I believe is part of the chapter, right? That's a great conference where you get to be face-to-face with the decision makers, whether they're schedulers and dispatchers or some smaller flight departments. They might be pilots themselves who are making decisions of where do we fly into when we go visit a particular city or a particular region. So it's a great opportunity for the airports to be there to engage and to market themselves. And then for your professional development, we have just an absolutely awesome leadership conference. And that one is going to be in February in Charlotte, North Carolina, in 2023, where we bring top speakers from the industry. Most of the speakers are paid speakers. So you get that level of caliber. And while the audience is an aviation audience, we focus on various leadership skills, various aspects of leading teams and that are relevant to the current environment. For example, in 2020, we talked about how to work in the pandemic and how to work in the virtual world and things like that. Highly encourage you to take a look at that and get it on the calendar. It's also a great networking opportunity because a lot of the flight department managers are at those conferences, and you're able to be face-to-face with them. So you're probably curious as to what's going on in the business aviation industry. I'm sure you get pretty good perspective as to what's happening at your airport in terms of the numbers of operations and how that compares to last year and pre-pandemic levels. Argus International is a company that does a lot of analysis. They take ADS-B data, FAA operations data, and they analyze it. So they just came out with their mid-year review. So you can see the numbers there. The North America flight activity is up 15% from the first half of 2021. So that's pretty good considering that things were already up from 2020 in last year. You can see Europe is up significantly, and globally we're up 30%. Then if we break it down to Part 135 and some of the other operations, Part 135 has shown growth from the very beginning. So that's why the numbers aren't as high at 12.8%. Fractional, about the same, right, at 14.2%. But Part 91 is starting to recover from the COVID lows, and it's up 19% in the first half of this year. You're probably seeing that with your corporations lifting travel restrictions. And so now those flight departments, again, can stretch their wings and take their employees different places. Whereas before, they had the lift, they had the capability to do it safely in terms of the health safety. But potentially on the other side, there was nobody to meet with in person. Everyone was in the virtual world, and the company had other concerns and restrictions. So I think we're seeing some relief from that, and that's very exciting. Workforce development is obviously important all around the industry. We talk about shortage of pilots. That's kind of the headline in the news, but all of us know that it's not just pilots. It's really everyone, mechanics, schedulers and dispatchers, airport professionals. So we're doing a lot to get people excited, motivated to join the industry. And it's a little bit of an extra effort for us to let them know that, hey, it might seem like a little bit of a mystery because when you're on a general aviation airport, hangar doors are closed, you don't know what's behind them. but know that behind those closed hangar doors are very friendly flight departments, some amazing career opportunities where you can start with fewer flight hours and go not just locally with the regional carrier, but very quickly climb the ladder and be with a flight department that travels internationally and start traveling the world. So business aviation is very exciting. We have a mentoring network. We have internships that we promote. We have a very robust YoPro organization that we've built over the last 6 or 7 years or so, very similar to what AAAE and other organizations have done. We have scholarships, and also we have free registration for students to our convention. So if you have interns, if you're working with students and you'd like to encourage them to focus on general aviation, business aviation side of the industry, feel free to suggest for them to go to our webpage to look at scholarships and all of these opportunities available to them. And if you see opportunities that we can partner with your airport to promote careers in business and general aviation, please let us know. We'd love to do something like that. So from government affairs, outlook, during the pandemic, there was concern about the Airport and Airway Trust Fund being depleted because there was less flying. We believe that that's been resolved. Infrastructure obviously is a very important tool for recovery, and you've seen a number of different relief packages, the CARES Act, the bilateral infrastructure law, and all of those. I know that for general aviation airports especially, the amounts were left to be desired, but at the same time, it was important for us to be included, and a little bit of money is better than no money. But nonetheless, we know that more is needed, and when we testify on Capitol Hill, there was just a state of general aviation industry hearing a few weeks ago. In our written testimony, we have submitted that there needs to be a focus on general aviation, and then that airport funding is really critical to business aviation. This is kind of at the core aspect of what I do, the National Airport Challenges, protecting access to airports. Sure, that's probably of interest to you in a way that your airport may not have the same angry, well-organized anti-airport neighbors that these airports do that I will highlight. But nonetheless, I feel like as I travel around the country, some of those elements are always present, and we have to be vigilant to make sure that we advocate and promote for our airport, that we engage our users and tenants to do the same. I think that's really essential, is to let those who are based at the airport understand that it's really in their hands to protect their access to the airport and their flying, because the neighbors will be going to all of the city council meetings and all the airport commission meetings. And if pilots and tenants are too busy, their opinion won't be heard. And a lot of the elected officials may not fully understand the value and the great asset that the airport is, and potentially lean and sympathize with the anti-airport sentiment, creating some challenges. So I'm sure you've been monitoring Santa Monica. That's been in the works for over 40 years, believe it or not, beginning of the jet age. And that's because Santa Monica has a tremendous amount of encroachment. If you have some photos of the aerial view coming up, you see how the runway is right in the neighborhood. And ultimately, the anti-airport sentiment there, it was saying, hey, we want to close the airport for good. We want to close it permanently. We don't want any aviation activity in the heart of our city. And our aviation perspective was, no, we want to keep it open in perpetuity. And by the way, at the time, there was a surplus property deed, as many of your airports may have one. So you know that it required the city to keep the airport open in perpetuity. They had a 30-year agreement that expired in 2015. And at that time, the city started to get very aggressive in challenging the surplus property deed and challenging the grant assurances and when those would expire. So ultimately, there were a number of lawsuits that were filed, and the FAA chose to settle them. So there was a settlement in 2017, and you may have seen in the news that that settlement ultimately allowed the city to shorten the runway from 5,000 feet that it was to 3,500 feet. And the settlement said nothing about removing pavement. Originally, it was done with just markings and paint, but ultimately the city wanted to make sure that that infrastructure could not be brought back to life, and then they removed the pavement on both ends. So ultimately, where we are now is that settlement requires the city to operate the airport through the end of 2028. And then come January 1st of 2029, the city has the option to close the airport. A lot of media reports have inaccurately portrayed that, hey, the airport's closing on December 31st of 2028. It's not a done deal. And so showed the way that the airport looked. This was 1947. As you can see, it's quite a lot of open space. This is right after the war. And as you know, Douglas Aircraft was based there, building the C-47s, the cargo version of the DC-3. And so the government went in and strengthened the runway and put a lot of federal money in there to improve the airport, hence the surplus property deed after the war when it was turned over to the city. In just less than 20 years, right? Look at the encroachment. Look how quickly the urban sprawl grew around the airport. But you can see on the north side there, that's the Douglas factory. So significant presence. And then ultimately in more recent years, 2016, the Douglas factory closed in late 70s. And with the help of the 30-year agreement, a lot of the north side was rebuilt. There's a lot of non-aeronautical office space, FBOs, hangars. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful airport to business aviation, which has a strong presence on the north side, and then general aviation, light piston aircraft on the south side. So you can see that's a little bit of insight into the shortening project. The city had the option of cutting off one end or the other. They decided to cut off a little bit of both. So that's kind of what it looked like with the markings at first. And then they went into the pavement removal project, brought in heavy equipment, did it at night. And ultimately, that's kind of what the airport looks like now, except the brown is a little bit greener. They've had the grass growing a little bit more. I spent a day at the airport with a photographer, and I think a lot of you can relate to this. It's so amazing to get a day in the life of an airport where you go to a repair shop, a prop repair shop, FBO Atlantic, a flight school, a restaurant. Everything is happening, and it's just so exciting to see that at the airport, and to know that so many people are involved, so many jobs, right, directly with the airport, and all of that being threatened with the potential closure. Then I went to the observation deck and took a picture of this boy. I'm sure a lot of us can also relate to that. A lot of us were those kids riding our bikes or walking to the airport fence. It's so amazing to have a general aviation airport like Santa Monica, where you can come face to face with aviation. You can smell it, you can hear it. And ultimately, as you get older, you can be part of it, right? You can work for one of the FBOs. You can help out at one of the flight schools. There's so many opportunities. And I think when we go to city council meetings, we get lost in some of the arguments. We forget the underlying human element and what our airports do for future of aviation. So that's kind of what empowers me when I help advocate for airports, is educating people the importance of all the jobs and all the opportunities there. So I think I've talked about a lot of this already. second to the last bullet, the California Voting Rights Act lawsuit. That's one of the promising things that may skew the way that the city council currently leans, which is very much anti-airport. There's a lawsuit that's been brought against Santa Monica and a number of other municipalities around California, saying that their city council is elected at large. And ultimately, a number of city council members live right around the airport and thus have a stake in its closure or its being restricted. Versus if it goes to districts, then you have representation from other areas of the city. There's arguments being made that some of the low-income population, some of the Hispanic populations are not being accurately represented at the current city council. And so districting would do that, but ultimately those other districts may recognize, hey, we get a lot of benefit from the airport because people who travel through there come and spend money at our businesses. It's a disaster relief. The airport has disaster relief capability for our community, all those things. And potentially that city council may vote for a different future of the airport. If not, I mean, we've got our work cut out for us to convince the current city councilors to invest in the airport and to keep it going. We've got a bunch of things going for us, right? Quieter, more capable aircraft, electric aircraft just on the horizon, and of course, advanced air mobility. I think the challenge that we all can agree on, how do we sell our general aviation airport to the surrounding neighborhoods? A lot of them, if they're not taking flight lessons, own an aircraft, or able to charter an aircraft, they can't really use the airport. Whereas with advanced air mobility, it's going to open up that air service to so many more people nearby. And potentially they can use it on a daily basis to commute into town and back, to commute to a larger commercial service airport and get on an airliner quicker than the current drive that they have. So it's really going to help airports like Santa Monica and many airports that, like the airports that you run in the future. So we're very excited from that perspective. Also wanted to talk about East Hampton Airport. This is a picture of Long Island. If you look kind of over here, that's New York City, way on the left. And so it's way out on the east side. Here's the red arrow. And you might have seen it in the news quite a bit. Ultimately, it's a very much of a noise challenge. A lot of helicopter traffic that is receiving a lot of focus, but nonetheless, there's also seaplanes, jets, all the type of aircraft that other airports receive. And over the last few years, there's been litigation on the significance of ANCA, and the aviation groups have won in 2016 to say that ANCA applies, and as you know, it runs parallel with the grant assurances. So ANCA applies whether the airport receives federal funds or not. And now that the grant assurances have run out in the September of last year, what the town has looked to do is to extinguish the statutory obligations. As you know, even though the grant assurances have expired, the statutory obligation for exclusive right, revenue diversion, and civil rights, they run in perpetuity. So the town, with the advice of its attorneys, thought that they could close and deactivate the existing airport, which had the airport code HGL. And then 33 hours later, in its place, open what they call a new airport, and it would have a different code. It's JPX. And essentially say that the new airport is still publicly owned, but private use. That thought that it would allow them to implement a PPR, prior permission required program, put in mandatory curfews and a lot of restrictions. Our position has been that no, that's essentially a sham closure. That transition is just to get around ANCA, and that should not be allowed. So we have a lawsuit in place that's currently pending. And a number of other groups have filed a lawsuit in state court. As you know, your airports probably have similar restrictions through state environmental requirements. So they can't just close an airport and open a new one without doing an appropriate study. And so their lawsuit was filed in New York State Court, and there is a temporary restraining order that was issued in those cases, which essentially halted that closure and reopening. But interestingly enough, because of the FAA chart dates, the charts have been updated long before the judge issued the temporary restraining order. So the charts don't accurately reflect that it continues to be a public use airport. The charts currently show that it's a private airport, but ultimately the city or the town is supposed to be operating it as though it's public use. So something very interesting to watch. We're very concerned of the national precedent setting aspect of this, that an airport can run out its grant assurances and then say, hey, we're going to close this airport, open a new one in its place. The leases stay with the same entity. The sponsor doesn't change. It's still under public ownership, which is what makes ANCA active, right? It's tied to being publicly owned. And then put in restrictions. There are a number of airports around the country that have reached out to me that said, hey, we're very concerned that our politicians may want to pressure us to follow this path. So we're very adamant about fighting that and protecting ANCA. At the same time, we understand that some type of reform is necessary there. We want to find a good balance for aircraft operations and neighborly flying and being sensitive to the community. And so we're working through that to find a way to implement that, potentially part voluntary programs, which have been in place for many, many years already and have had great cooperation up to high 90s percentile of users following the voluntary procedures and voluntary curfews and routes. But we're looking to do more. So stay tuned. I think there's going to be some great things coming out of this that will ultimately help the industry as we morph and have to adjust to be sensitive to the needs and the requirements of the communities. Some of the recent airport battles that are ongoing, in addition to those two big ones, Santa Monica and East Hampton. I'm sure you've seen Reed Hillview in the news. That's the airport in the San Jose area, in the Northern California Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. That I said, we're not going to take any more federal funds. We're going to run out our clock, similar to what East Hampton did. And their grant assurances run out in 2031. However, they have really clung on to the leaded fuel issue, and they were able to commission a study that provided information in their favor, and now they're pushing for closure prior to that date. And then, of course, you've seen that they're being really aggressive about curtailing the sale of 100 low lead, only offering the unleaded fuel. And there's a Part 13 of that investigation, and that's still ongoing, and we're monitoring it very closely to see where it goes, because ultimately that could affect more airports around the country being forced to not provide the leaded fuel before we have the replacement that's fleet-wide, available fleet-wide for 100 low lead. Lantana in South Florida is another one to watch. They banned jets, and there was a little bit of a fluke where they had a jet ban prior to 1990, prior to passage of ANCA, but then they repealed it. And so when ANCA passed, there was no jet ban. And then they brought it back in the 90s, and nobody kind of caught on to it until recently. One of the pilots tried to fly in his aircraft there and did some research and said, wait a second, you brought this jet ban in after ANCA, so therefore it's not grandfathered. And the FAA has ruled in the pilot's favor, but Palm Beach County has appealed it. As you know, Part 16, you can appeal to the FAA, and the next step would be to appeal to the courts, and that's where it is now. So something to watch as well. We believe that the FAA will prevail, and the airport will not be able to ban jets. This is a success story where the mayor of Detroit looked at the airport and said, hey, there's a lot of land here that can be used for non-aeronautical use. And they tried to explore those opportunities. A group of users, tenants, students that were using the airport quickly came together, organized, and made a very strong campaign to the mayor and the city council. So now our airport is valuable, and the best use of this land is for aeronautical use because, as we know, it's a gateway to our city. It's jobs, it's learning opportunities. They have a technical high school that's affiliated with the airport, just all kinds of great things. And the mayor had a change of heart and is now looking to lengthen the runway and modernize the airport. So all those things are happening. It's a successful airport advocacy story to watch. So if your airport is under attack by an elected official, this is a great way to show the tenants that, hey, if you organize, you can be convincing and you can succeed. But this is what it looked like during the time that it was kind of in no man's land, so to speak, when the mayor was pushing for closure. They were not investing in it. I'm sure none of the airports have broken signs with grass covering them, like that, hangars that are dilapidated, some of the doors that don't even open. So before I close, I wanted to highlight some of the other tools that we have. TALPA, Takeoff and Landing Performance Assessment. That has come out 2016, so quite a few years ago. But you probably are still getting some questions as to how you're doing the runway condition assessment. Feel free to direct those questions to our website, so nba.org/TALPA. We have created some great educational videos specifically aimed at pilots that they can watch and learn more about it. And we're constantly updating them. So we have an update coming out in advance of the season. And of course, our appeal to airports. I know the South Central chapter, you don't get too much of winter conditions, but when you do, we appreciate it when you file the FICONs and update them regularly so that our members who are flying into your airport or flying out of your airport can have the latest conditions accurately reflected in the information that they're receiving and briefing themselves on. The other issue that the FAA has been big on is wrong surface events. I don't know if any of your airports have parallel runways or taxiways that run parallel to the runway. They can be confused. That's something that I'm very much involved in on the safety side, and would be happy to talk to you and see if we can raise awareness. The FAA has created a myriad of tools on this. We recently had podcast and highlighted some of the tools that the FAA has put out. So also wanted to let you know, we do have a noise abatement program, nba.org/noise, where we have noise abatement procedures. We have a number of publications that can help advocate for the airport, talk about the airport that you can use, nba.org/airports, where you can download those as PDFs. If you haven't been to this website, it has some great graphics, some great statistics about business aviation and general aviation. Feel free to use that as you promote the airport and the industry. Some other resources like the Business Aviation Fact Book. There's a study that was done on some of the top performing companies and the companies that are higher performing use business aviation. And there's a book that's called Business Leaders on Business Aviation. And that has a number of CEOs of companies that everyone would recognize, and some other smaller ones that talk about the value of business aviation and why it's important to their company, that also can help open people's eyes to the importance of our industry. And so I also wanted to make an appeal. If you're not an NBA member currently and business aviation is part of your airport's business, I encourage you to join and be part of us. There's a special rate for airport members. That's $435. But if you're a new airport, you haven't been a member for the first year, we're offering $100 to join. With that code Alex100, feel free to write that down and join. Reach out to me if I can be of help in any way. And that concludes my formal presentation. Happy to take some questions and engage in discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Alex. That's lots of good info. You guys you're busy. You're busy. There's lots of issues going on, and I can see there's lots of things for you to follow. So, well, group, I'm going to open it up. Let's see if you guys have any questions for Alex based on anything that he's presented to us, or if there's any issues at your airport in your region that you just wanted to bounce off of him. Please feel free. Floor is open.
Very shy group on this Wednesday afternoon.
We're like that sometimes.
Or maybe you just answered all of our questions. Maybe it was such a great presentation, we don't have any questions.
Gosh, I should have omitted some slides. Created some mysteries.
I thought it was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jane, which airport are you affiliated with?
I'm actually with the state of New Mexico. I'm the airport
cool.
manager of Conchas Lake Airport. So I work with Steve Hadley.
Wonderful. Great.
Yeah,
I'm glad you know
yeah.
Steve and work with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we enjoy Steve. He's real active. He's at a lot of our conferences. He makes himself very available. So
that's great. I love hearing that. He's definitely a force in the industry, and I'm glad that on the airport side, you don't feel that he's a stranger, that you know him well, feel comfortable approaching him. That's really important. From my perspective, as I mentioned, the regional representatives really bridge the world of users and tenants and airports, and so that's great that they're helpful to you.
What give us an example of some of the legislative issues that are on the minds of your members. So in this last legislative session or two, airports are struggling with funding and infrastructure and some of the regulatory issues. What kinds of things are on the tops of your minds of your flight departments and your pilots? Just curious.
Yeah, sustainable aviation fuel is obviously a big one. A lot of our members don't mind the extra cost. They love putting it in the airplane. They love being a more conscious user of aviation and being friendlier to the environment. So there's a tax blender, a blender's tax credit that's currently going through Congress. That's of value to us. We're looking at the next FAA reauthorization and issues that are important to our members. I know there's been some talk about, not pioneered by NBAA, but I think NASAO on the non-primary entitlements and reforming that program. I think we would be very supportive to find whatever mechanism would create a more robust funding stream for general aviation airports. Certainly, we recognize that the current system of $150,000 a year, you can only collect it for 4 years, right? That hasn't worked, and that hasn't allowed airports to really have meaningful ability to do projects. So that would be important to us to support as well.
Interesting. What other questions do we have for Alex? Alex, are your members, are your departments, are they impacted by the age 65 rule, or is that strictly just air carrier stuff?
It's strictly air carriers, or Part 121. So ultimately, some of our members benefit from that in a way where somebody might retire from the airlines but feel, hey, I can't stay on the ground. Then they go and they fly and work with one of our members.
Interesting. And you, with COVID and everything, are you, just a general sense, you gave us a little bit of data in your presentation, but in a general sense, is most companies starting to come back now? Are they starting to jump back in with both feet and ratchet back up again?
For sure. So on the 135 part, the charter, that's been going strong since a couple of months into the pandemic. Once the lockdowns ended people said, hey, I don't want to travel on the airlines. At the time, the schedules and service were very limited, right? So they found a way, those who could, to fly Part 135. So that's been going strong. 91K, which is fractional, kind of following that. A lot of people traveling to leisure destinations, big things like that. But then if you look at the true Part 91, the flight departments, that really lagged because companies did not allow their employees to travel as widely as they did before the pandemic. And it seems that that's really loosening up now. Of course, we have bumps and we were doing well, and then all of a sudden Omicron came along, right? It seems like now we've kind of recognized that there's going to be ups and downs in the number of cases, but the virus is here to stay, and we got to go on with our lives.
Interesting. How are you guys seeing the world in whole? Is it opening back up? Are your members, our departments and employees, are they able to get to where they're wanting to go now better than 6 months ago, 9 months ago?
For sure. And I think a lot of that has to do with international travel. We used to have that requirement. You had to test 24 hours before entering the country. Now that's gone. Similar restrictions have been removed abroad. So now you can travel the world again, and that's creating some movement, some momentum.
That's good. And then CBP stuff, that side of the house, the interactions that your folks have from their flying internationally. Are you guys having any issues with that function in terms of, are there enough employees? Are they staffed correctly? Are they in the places they need to be that your members are flying in and out of the airports and such? Is that generally okay, or do you guys see any lingering or new issues after pandemic?
That's a great question. I think in terms of the staffing, it seems to be okay, at least at the current levels, because we're not completely ramped up back to where we were 2019. And prior to that, we went through a stint where CBP said, hey, we got to get full cost recovery, right? And so a number of airports had to scramble. Some had to close their facilities, but for the most part, I think airports have figured it out and are passing the higher costs onto the users, and the users are ultimately paying that because of the convenience. There's even a safety factor, right? If you have to go to another airport to clear customs and then have another flight to your home airport, that's a safety concern. A lot of times that would be done at low altitude, VFR, after you come back from an international trip and the crew is worn out. So to be able to eliminate that is significant enough to pay a slightly higher fee at customs. In terms of the locations, I think there's certainly desire to have customs at more locations, especially where companies are based or where companies frequently travel to. So, but not too much of what I see come across my desk is maybe a handful of airports where they say, hey, we'd love to see them create a user fee customs facility, so that way we can go directly there and not have to clear customs somewhere else.
Excellent.
Yeah. So if 1 second, just close that thought. So if your airport is one of those where you'd like to get customs, let me know, and potentially we can work with CBP and we can work with the users who are advocating for the facility to help bring that to fruition. A number of airports have found creative ways to raise funds to build the facility. They've gotten funds from their state aviation departments for ramp and things like that, where they've been able to get some grant funding. Because otherwise, it's very costly. It does cost $4 to $5 million, unfortunately, to build that Fort Knox.
Yeah.
So please.
Hey, so Alex, Gary down at McCampbell Porter. Hey, so reference to Santa Monica, are they looking to close that one? Is that just for economic developments or more housing, or what are they looking to do out there?
certainly we can speculate as to what they would do. The city is selling its citizens that it's going to be a park. But we know that right now the airport is self-sustainable, right? The park will not be. You just have to water the grass and things like that. But ultimately, there's huge costs in building the park, as we saw in Chicago when MIGS closed. It took many years for that to be transformed in millions and millions of dollars. So the speculation is that it may be sold as a park to the residents, but it's likely not going to be able to stay that way for long. And certainly there are a lot of developers who would be salivating over that last significant piece of undeveloped land that has such a great location. For the current city council, as I mentioned, they do want to close it. They don't see the value. They're driven significantly by, they all live, they're neighbors of the airport. So they're all driven by their neighbors who are complaining about noise, pollution, the typical anti-airport arguments that we hear all around the country, and are being short-sighted about the disaster relief, the medical transport, the economic impact, all those things that the airport brings to the city. So we hope to have a change of heart. We hope that potentially in 6 years or so, when it comes time to make that final decision, they will exercise responsible governance and say, hey, well, wait a second. I don't want to make a decision that's benefiting just a few. I want to make a decision that's going to benefit the many, and for many future generations. If I close this airport, there's never going to be another airport at this location in my city. We're staying positive that we'll be able to preserve it.
Thank you.
Loaded question. Do you feel like just the logical encroachment around some of these airports is just logically going to lead to this kind of an issue? Or do you feel like we as airports are not doing a good enough job to tout the benefits, the realization, the emergency access, all the benefits of having an airport in access in and out of your community? Are we not doing a good enough job, or do you think this is just a few airports that have made decisions that have just led to this? Curious what your thoughts might be.
That's a great question, Jeff. I think it's both. I think we can do a better job getting our information out and convincing people how important the airport is. In the case of East Hampton, for example, it's not just people who live close to the airport, but people who are being overflown miles and miles away. And I think for a lot of your airports, you probably have a number of noise complaints that are close by, but then you have complaints that are miles and miles away where people are hearing and just even seeing airplanes. And so that's going to be a challenge. Of course, if they live really close, that's an even bigger challenge. If you look at what's happening in Colorado around the Rocky Mountain Metro Airport, they're getting bombarded by the community who are speaking out against flight training and flights in the pattern. And as you know, there's just a couple of miles from the center line of the airport's runway. And so if we had the ability to keep houses from being built there, that would help us. But ultimately, again, it comes back to that education as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're out of time. Man, this hour's flown by really quick, Alex.
It sure did.
Presented a lot of info to us. For everybody that's on the call, I want to echo what Alex was mentioning earlier. Their annual conference in the fall each year is one of my must go to events. It's an amazing experience. He did not pay me or tell me to say any of this. It's just something that once I did, I don't ever want to try and do without again. It's so many people, so many networking opportunities, so many educational sessions, so many fellow airports across the country. There's global aspects. You meet people from from Latin America, from Europe, from just all over. It's an amazing opportunity to focus on aviation. And then I just call it the eye candy when you walk in and you just see these, the cutting edge technology and rub arms with the folks that are inventing and implementing all this stuff. It's an amazing opportunity. And I recommend, I challenge you all, if you get the chance to go, if you're having trouble, find somebody on your airport that might be going and exhibiting or something, and try and get a access with them, and just go with them, whatever it takes to get there. It's a great opportunity. And NBAA, you guys, just listening to you, the partnership, we align on so many issues. It's great to see that. It's great to know that the partnership and the team works out there. I know that we share a lot of the same core values with access and the importance of airports. And, we deal with your members on a daily basis as they come in and out of our airports. And so, it's a great thing. We appreciate NBAA and all the things that they do. Alex, thanks for taking your time to be with us today and to educate us. We'll probably call on you again here sometime in the future, get you and Steve, if it's not on this one, maybe at one of our conferences to come and join, spend some time with us in that venue as well. So thank you.
Delighted. Thank you so much for everyone's time and attention.
You bet. Thank you. So everyone, it looks like we're out of time for today. Our next opportunity, I think we were looking at the calendar. Is it the 3rd of September? Is that right, Gary?
7th.
7th, I'm sorry. So put that on your radar screen. We'll work with the chapter manager and the group to firm up that date and get our program put together. Thank you all for taking time to be with us today. Stay tuned for a couple things we're hoping to do this fall with our committee, getting out and about a little bit. So we'll try and get some more of that information together and get that out to you all. Thanks again for joining us today. You all have a great day and a great rest of the week. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
See y'all.